I want you to imagine, just for a second, standing in front of a canvas. But I don't want you to picture, one of those perfectly smooth museum pieces.
Right, like those hyper-polished Renaissance paintings.
Exactly, like the Northern Renaissance stuff, where the
Yeah.
surface is just, it looks like it was printed by a machine, honestly, where the artist spent, I don't know, months trying to hide every single trace of the brush.
Glaze after glaze after
Yeah,
glaze.
just totally flat. I want you to imagine a canvas that feels less like a flat image and much more like a window into a swirling emotional storm.
Which is a very different physical
It
experience.
really is. So just catch your breath for a second, because the immediate visceral punch of raw color and thick, heavy texture on this thing, it creates an actual optical disruption.
It literally messes with your eyes.
Yeah. You can practically smell the linseed oil and the cold wax and the turpentine. I mean, if you stand close enough to it, you can actually see the physical shadows being cast by the ridges of paint onto the canvas itself.
Which means it is a profoundly aggressive physical object, before you even begin to process what the image actually represents.
Right.
You aren't just looking at a picture. You are confronting a topography. It demands spatial awareness from you.
And that topography, that spatial demand, is the perfect jumping-off point for what we're exploring today.
So today we are taking a deep dive into a specific, really remarkable painting titled Celestial Vigil over the Verdant Wilds.
It's a massive piece to tackle.
It is. And our mission today isn't to just give you like a dry art history lecture. We're not going to sit here listing off dates or, the biographical details of the artist.
Or what it sold for at auction last week.
Exactly. Nobody cares about the auction prices today. We are undertaking an exploration of how a single static image uses physical chemistry, optical physics, texture, and this really powerful symbolism to communicate a complex emotional narrative.
We're looking at the mechanics of it.
Yes, the mechanics of how paint can completely bypass language and just, boom, hijack the human nervous system. And this particular painting, Celestial Vigil over the Verdant Wilds, it really is a masterclass in that specific type of visual communication.
It really is.
Because it circumvents the logical, language processing centers of your prefrontal cortex. It targets the older, much more primal parts of the brain, the parts that handle threat detection and spatial reasoning and pattern recognition.
So before we pull out the magnifying glass and look at the actual brushstrokes, let's sketch out the overall layout of the painting in your mind's eye.
Set the stage.
Right. So if you split the canvas roughly in half horizontally, the upper half is dominated by this fiercely colorful, extremely turbulent sky.
It's chaotic.
Completely chaotic. It is a mix of cadmium reds, these searing oranges, and stark titanium whites, and it's all layered with a palette knife. It honestly looks like the atmosphere itself is undergoing some kind of violent thermodynamic event.
Yeah, there is zero sense of atmospheric calm up there. The directional lines of the paint application, they create this vortex. It's just a feeling of relentless atmospheric pressure.
And then clashing directly against that upper inferno, the lower half of the painting is a dense, heavy wilderness.
The Verdant Wilds from the title.
Exactly. And it is painted in these deep, light-absorbing greens, raw umbers, and blacks. It feels entirely impenetrable.
Like a wall of forest.
Yeah. And then, sitting right in the middle of that turbulent upper sky, just watching over this whole collision, is a central golden orb.
Which is very distinct.
It's distinctly circular. It maintains this sharp geometric integrity against all the surrounding chaos.
And then there's the hidden element.
Right, finally, tucked away deep down in the shadowy, heavy greens of the lower half. And you really have to lean in and look closely to see this. There are these tiny, delicate, intricately painted yellow flowers.
So we are looking at a composition of extreme polarities here.
Yeah, sure.
You've got the heat of the sky against the cold of the ground. You have chaos fighting against geometry, overwhelming macro-scale forces contrasted with microscopic, fragile details.
But we can't even begin to talk about what those symbols mean, right? Like the orb, or the flowers, or the sky. We have to first talk about the engineering of the painting.
The literal physical chemistry.
Yeah, the literal physical chemistry of how the paint is applied to the canvas. Because that dictates the entire psychological mood of the piece.
It's the structural foundation.
It's the foundation of the emotional house we were walking into.
You really cannot decouple the narrative meaning of this piece from the physical mechanics of its creation. The primary mechanism driving the viewer's experience here is an extreme application of a technique known as impasto.
Okay, so let's break down the mechanics of impasto. What exactly is happening on a molecular or physical level when we look at the surface of this canvas?
Well, impasto is derived from an Italian word meaning dough or mixture.
Like pizza dough.
Yeah, actually exactly like dough. In the context of oil painting, it refers to laying paint onto the canvas in extraordinarily thick, heavy layers. To understand why this matters, we have to look at what oil paint actually is. At its core, it's essentially dry pigment.
Just colored dust, basically.
Right. Ground up rocks, minerals, synthetic chemicals, and that dust is suspended in a binder, usually linseed oil.
Got it.
Now, traditionally, artists thin this mixture out with solvents like turpentine to create really smooth, thin glazes.
To get that flat Renaissance look we talked about.
Exactly. But with impasto, the artist goes in the complete opposite direction. They use the paint straight out of the tube, or, more likely for a piece that's textured, they mix it with thickening agents.
Like what? What thickens oil paint?
Things like cold wax medium or stand oil, which dramatically increases the viscosity of the paint.
So they are turning the paint into a literal paste that holds its shape entirely.
Yes.
They aren't brushing it on anymore. They are troweling it on, like a mason with mortar.
That's a great way to put it. They are using palette knives or extremely stiff bristle brushes loaded with massive amounts of this thickened material. Wow. And because the paint is so viscous, so thick, the physical gesture, the actual aggressive movement of the artist's wrist and arm is permanently recorded in the medium.
Because it freezes like that.
Right. The paint doesn't level out as it dries. It cures right there in these raised ridges, sharp peaks, and deep valleys.
I'm picturing the surface of a glacier, or the rough bark of a tree, but made entirely of red and orange pigment.
And the transformation that causes is profound. Impasto turns a two-dimensional plane into a three-dimensional object.
It breaks the rule of what a painting is supposed to be.
It does. It abandons the traditional goal of painting, which is usually to create an illusion of depth using perspective and shading. Instead, it provides literal physical depth.
Which fundamentally alters how the artwork exists in a room.
Exactly, because it changes how the painting interacts with ambient light.
Right, because of the shadows.
Every single raised ridge of paint catches a specular highlight from the lights in the gallery, and every valley casts a microscopic physical shadow.
So as the light source in the room changes over the course of a day, or even just as you, the viewer, physically walk past the canvas, those highlights and shadows continuously shift.
Right. The painting is actively reacting to the space it occupies.
It's a kinetic object, in a way. You aren't passively observing a frozen snapshot of a landscape. You are engaging with a surface that changes depending on where you stand.
And that shifting light creates a phenomenon called optical flicker.
Optical flicker.
Yeah, it keeps the visual cortex constantly firing, trying to resolve a surface that refuses to just sit still.
Because the shadows keep moving.
Right. This makes the painting feel deeply restless and energetic.
You know, I look at those aggressive, hardened ridges of paint, and it actually makes me think of Braille.
Braille!
Yeah, because the impasto technique forces the painting to be felt visually. It's like emotional Braille.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You can scan your eyes over that texture and intuitively sense the velocity or the anger or the passion and the physical strokes that put the paint there.
Yeah, that concept of emotional Braille ties perfectly into something called haptic perception.
Haptic, like touch.
Exactly. Haptic perception is how we recognize objects through touch, but humans also possess visual haptics.
Wait, visual haptics. So touching with your eyes.
Sort of, yeah. Our brains look at a texture and immediately simulate what it would feel like to physically touch it.
Oh, wow.
It triggers the corresponding emotional and physical responses without us ever laying a finger on the object.
Okay, think about how our evolutionary history makes texture inherently psychological, right?
Yeah.
Like if you are walking barefoot and you see sharp, jagged rocks, your nervous system automatically spikes your adrenaline.
Absolutely.
Rough, sharp textures signal caution or potential injury or just high energy. Conversely, if you see a smooth, sandy beach, your brain signals safety and relaxation.
And the artist of Celestial Vigil is purposefully exploiting that hardwired evolutionary response.
By making it so rough.
Yes. By covering the upper half of the canvas in this aggressive, jagged, heavy impasto, they are flooding the viewer's visual cortex with signals of rough, sharp terrain.
So it puts the autonomic nervous system on high alert.
High alert, yes. Before the brain has even processed that it's looking at a painting of a sky.
That is wild. The physical texture of the paint is doing half the heavy lifting before you even know what the picture is. But then the color palette is amplifying that tension exponentially.
The colors are essential here.
The colors here are designed to cause friction. I mean, we have these high-key, saturated warm colors, the fiery reds and oranges colliding violently with the light-absorbing deep greens and blacks of the lower half.
The artist is leveraging optical physics here. We often talk about warm and cool colors as if it's purely a metaphorical description, right? Like a metaphor for temperature.
Yeah, like red is fire, blue is ice.
Right, but there is a physiological reason why warm colors seem to advance toward the viewer and cool colors seem to recede away from the viewer.
Wait, really? A physiological reason?
Yes, it relates to something called chromatic aberration in the human eye.
Chromatic aberration. Okay, break that down for us. How does the physical lens of the eye react differently to red versus green?
Well, different colors are simply different wavelengths of light, right?
Right.
Red light has a longer wavelength, while blue and green light, they have shorter wavelengths.
Okay, tracking with you.
So when light passes through the lens of your eye, the lens refracts or bends the light to focus it onto your retina at the back of the eye.
Like a camera lens.
Exactly. But because red wavelengths are longer, they are bent less by the lens. They actually come into focus slightly behind the retina.
Behind it, so it's blurry.
It would be, but your eye compensates. To bring the red into focus, the lens of your eye has to physically bulge. It has to become more convex.
You're saying the eye has to physically work harder to process the color red.
Exactly. And the physiological action of the lens, bulging that, is the exact same action the eye takes when focusing on an object that is physically very close to your face.
Oh, so your brain gets confused.
In a way, yes. Because the lens bulges, your brain interprets the color red as being closer to you in physical space.
That is incredible.
It really is. And conversely, shorter wavelengths, like blue and deep green, they are bent more sharply. They focus slightly in front of the retina.
So the lens has to do the opposite.
Right. The lens flattens out to focus on them, which is the action used for looking at distant objects.
So when the artist places a massive field of highly saturated cadmium red right next to a block of deep dark green, they are creating a literal three-dimensional optical illusion that stresses the eye out.
Yes, the eye is constantly shifting focus back and forth between the advancing red and the receding green. The lens is rapidly bulging and flattening.
It's over and over again.
It creates a push and pull effect on the retina that causes actual physical visual fatigue. The colors are literally fighting for spatial dominance in your eye.
That completely explains why looking at this painting feels so exhausting. It's not just a vibe, it's an active, energetic confrontation.
The visual friction is intense.
So the stage is set with this chaotic energy, through the thick impasto texture and the demanding color contrast. But the energy isn't just a uniform wash over the whole canvas. It is sharply bifurcated into two warring halves.
Right.
Which brings us to the core structural conflict of the piece. The fiery sky meeting the verdant wilds.
The composition is just a study in extreme dichotomy. Let's examine the top half first. The sky isn't rendered with the horizontal calming strokes typical of normal landscape painting.
No, not at all.
The palette knife marks are swirling, they're diagonal and deeply intersecting.
It mimics the thermodynamics of an actual firestorm.
Yeah.
It feels like convection. And fire is such a potent symbol, right? Because it is the ultimate double-edged sword.
How do you mean?
Well, at a controlled scale, fire provides life-sustaining warmth and light. We need it. But at the scale depicted in this painting where it's uncontained, just swallowing the entire upper hemisphere of the canvas, it is pure volatile consumption.
It becomes a destroyer.
Yes, it's an entity that destroys everything in its path just to sustain itself.
And opposing that uncontained volatility is the ground, the verdant wilds. The artist has shifted from the advancing reds we talked about to these heavy, receding, impenetrable dark greens, raw umbers, and ivory blacks.
The texture in the bottom half is still thick impasto, but the directional force of the strokes is completely different.
Very different.
Like the sky is swirling outward and upward, but the strokes in the dark woods pull violently downward. They feel like lead weights anchoring the bottom of the canvas. It literally pulls gravity into the piece.
You have the relentless upward convection of the fiery sky colliding directly with the stubborn, immovable mass of the dark wilderness.
Right in the middle.
Right. And the point where these two opposing forces meet is the horizon line. Now, in traditional landscape painting, the horizon line serves as a visual anchor.
A place to rest.
Exactly. Because humans are bipedal creatures governed by gravity, a flat horizontal line provides our vestibular system with a sense of orientation and balance. It is where the eye naturally goes to rest.
But the artist completely denies us that rest here. The horizon line in this painting isn't peaceful. It's a jagged, violent battleground.
There is no soft transition.
Right, there is no atmospheric gradient, no gentle sfumato blending the sky into the earth. The searing reds just smash directly into the light-absorbing black.
And the denial of equilibrium is the entire point. The human brain naturally seeks symmetry. It wants smooth transitions and resolution.
We crave balance.
We do. So by creating this harsh, unrelenting collision, the artist intentionally forces the viewer to sit in a state of psychological discomfort.
You know, I have to challenge the traditional reading of this piece, though.
Ew.
Yeah, calling this a landscape feels almost inadequate to me. When we think of the landscape, we think of a literal geographic location, like a forest or a mountain.
Sure.
But looking at the sheer violence, the lack of spatial logic, and the overwhelming abstraction of this piece, I don't think this represents a physical place at all.
Okay, what do you think it is?
I see this sky and this ground as a visual metaphor for an internal psychological state.
Let's follow that thread. If we abandon the geographic interpretation, how do you map the topography of this canvas onto the human psyche?
I see it as a portrait of a mind in profound crisis. Look at the sky, right? The loud, swirling, hot, uncontainable red and orange energy. To me, that is the exact visual equivalent of severe anxiety.
Anxiety, okay.
It's the architecture of a panic attack. It's the feeling of your thoughts racing so fast that they generate a mental heat you just can't control. It's the hyperarousal of the nervous system.
That's a very visceral reading. And the grounds?
The ground, the verdant wilds with its heavy, light-absorbing blacks and deep greens that physically drag your eye downward, that represents deep depression. It's apathy. It's the immovable, crushing weight of despair.
So you are proposing that the horizon line represents the collision of hyperarousal and hypoarousal occurring simultaneously within a single psyche.
Yes, exactly. I mean, anyone who has experienced severe burnout knows this exact feeling.
It's a paradox.
It is. You are completely exhausted, heavily depressed. Your body feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds.
Okay.
But your brain is still spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour with uncontrollable anxiety.
A terrible state to be in.
It is the most torturous state of being. And that horizon line, to me, is the friction between panic and despair grinding against each other.
I see the logic in the psychological reading for sure, but I'm actually going to push back on the scale of your interpretation.
Okay, push back.
I think mapping this purely onto human anxiety makes it too small.
Too small.
Yes. The visceral punch of this painting, the sheer size of those impasto strokes, it doesn't feel like a single human mind to me. It feels cosmological.
Cosmological, like planetary forces.
Exactly. I interpret this not as a panic attack, but as primordial creation and destruction.
Oh, wow.
The fiery sky is a solar event or an accretion disk or the volatile atmosphere of a young, chaotic planet just forming.
Like the Hadean eon of Earth.
Yes. And the verdant wilds represent the slow, agonizing geological time required for carbon to compress, for tectonic plates to shift, for dense, primordial matter to just coalesce.
So it's geology meeting astrophysics.
Right. The friction at the horizon isn't human anxiety. It's the elemental clash of thermodynamics against solid matter. It's about forces that operate on a scale of billions of years, utterly indifferent to human existence.
Okay, I really like that pushback. The elemental reading gives the painting a terrifying grandeur. It's huge. But whether we read it as a mind tearing itself apart or a planet in the throes of primordial chaos, the baseline remains the same, right?
It's about overwhelming forces.
Yes, it is a portrait of overwhelming, unmanageable forces. And yet, the painting isn't entirely chaotic. Right in the geometric center of this storm, there is a singular element that halts the chaos.
A golden orb.
Yes, let's dissect the celestial vigil itself, because the title gives this orb agency.
It does.
A vigil is an intentional act. It implies keeping watch, usually in the darkness, and it often carries solemn or protective connotations. It is a state of active presence, not just passive existence.
And visually, the orb operates according to completely different physical laws than the rest of the canvas.
How so?
Well, we noted the chaotic, diagonal, swirling palette knife marks of the sky. But the orb is a distinct, recognizable shape. It is a nearly perfect circle.
Right. In a landscape of jagged lines and violent collisions, a perfect circle just stops the eye cold.
Geometrically, the circle is perhaps the most universally potent symbol in human cognition.
Because it's so rare in chaos.
Yes, and across ancient cultures, from the Enso and Zen Buddhism to the halos of Byzantine iconography, the circle represents unity, infinity, completeness, and divine order. It has no beginning and no end.
It's perfect.
In the context of this painting, the orb is an injection of pure structural integrity into an otherwise disintegrating environment.
It's the anchor. I want to try an analogy here to capture how it functions visually and conceptually. It reminds me of a gyroscope.
A gyroscope. Interesting. Unpack how you see that operating.
Think about how a gyroscope works mechanically.
Right?
You have a spinning rotor mounted inside a series of rings, or gimbals.
Right, on an axis.
Exactly. And no matter how much you tilt or twist or violently shake the outer frame, the spinning rotor in the center maintains its orientation. It conserves its angular momentum.
It stays level.
Yeah. The golden orb acts as the visual gyroscope of this painting. The fiery sky is tearing itself apart. The ground is sinking into darkness. The outer frame is experiencing maximum turbulence. But the orb holds the center of mass. It provides a permanent point of orientation.
That is a highly precise analogy, because the gyroscope doesn't stop the external turbulence, does it?
No, the ship is still rocking.
But it provides a fixed reference point within it, and the orb's color is critical here as well. It isn't painted with the searing, blinding titanium white of the hottest parts of the fire,
Right.
nor is it the heavy black of the woods. It is a warm, solid, resonant yellow gold. It occupies a middle value.
But the nature of its vigil is ambiguous to me. I look at it, and part of me wonders if it's protective or if it's completely indifferent.
Ambiguity is powerful.
Like, is it a comforting presence, keeping watch to ensure the ground isn't consumed? Or is it an unblinking cosmic eye that simply observes the destruction without intervening at all?
The ambiguity is definitely deliberate. If it were overtly protective, like a shining sun beaming happy rays, the painting would become a cliché.
It would feel cheap.
Exactly. But if it were entirely hostile, like an eye of Sauron burning the earth, it would be purely nihilistic. The power of the vigil lies in its neutrality. It witnesses.
It witnesses.
In psychology, the act of having your suffering or your chaos observed without judgment is often the very first step towards stabilization. The orb witnesses the clash of realms.
And it directs the viewer's attention to a very specific place. The orb is situated high in the sky, but its placement and the subtle halo of light around it, they draw an invisible vertical plumb line straight down into the darkest part of the verdant wilds.
It points you where to look.
Yes, the vigil is focused downward.
The artist uses the geometry of the orb to force our gaze away from the massive, sublime forces of the sky, demanding that we zoom in on the microscopic details hidden in the shadows.
We have to adjust our optical scale completely here. We leave the macro level of thermodynamics and geological weight, and we enter the micro level.
It's a stark transition.
Down in the deepest, most impenetrable corners of the dark greens, tucked away where the impasto shadows are the deepest, the artist has painted these delicate, intricate yellow flowers.
The shift in scale is really jarring. It requires a cognitive reset from the viewer.
Because we were just looking at galaxies and fire.
Right. We just spent all our energy processing the overwhelming threat of the fiery sky and the crushing density of the woods. Those macro elements trigger awe and fear. Then you are forced to step intimately close to the canvas to perceive these microscopic moments of botanical fragility.
The first thing that hits you when you spot them is the color echoing. The flowers aren't red like the fire, and they aren't green like the forest.
No, they stand out.
They are painted using the exact same golden yellow pigment as the central orb.
And that is a deliberate structural tether. In visual theory, when an artist isolates a highly distinct color and repeats it in disparate areas of the composition, they are establishing a conceptual circuit.
Linking them together.
Exactly. The viewer's brain automatically links the objects sharing that color. The macro orb is fundamentally tied to the micro flowers.
It implies a flow of energy. The overwhelming fire of the sky isn't nourishing the ground, it's threatening it. But the steady golden resonance of the vigil is piercing the darkness. And where that conceptual light lands, life persists.
Let's look at the biology of this. You proposed earlier that this might not be a psychological landscape, but rather an elemental or ecological one.
Right, the cosmological.
If we look at real-world ecology, there are fire-dependent ecosystems.
Oh, really?
Yes. Lodgepole pines, fireweeds, certain chaparral shrubs. These are pyrophytic plants. They have evolved to literally require the heat of a devastating wildfire to survive.
Require it, like they need the fire.
Yes, the heat is needed to melt the resin on their cones or to crack their thick seed coats so they can finally germinate.
Wow. So the fire isn't just a force of meaningless destruction.
The fire is a necessary catalyst. In the aftermath of a blaze that reduces a forest to black ash, the very first things to break through the dark, scorched earth are often brightly colored wildflowers,
Because the canopy is gone and light can reach them.
and they thrive in the nutrient-rich ash. The flowers in the painting represent life that has adapted to exist and perhaps even requires the chaotic forces that surround it.
That entirely reframes the relationship between the top and bottom halves of the canvas. The verdant wilds aren't just cowering under the fire. They are waiting for it to pass so they can utilize its energy.
Exactly.
The flowers are the visual proof of that ecological resilience.
They're emblems of stubborn, defiant survival. I mean, a flower blooming in a sunny pastoral meadow is aesthetically pleasing but conceptually inert. It's just pretty.
It's easy.
Right. But a flower blooming in the darkest, most oppressive, chaotic environment imaginable, that is a radical statement of endurance.
I want to run a thought experiment real quick.
Let's hear it.
Imagine the artist is standing in their studio, looking at the finished canvas. The sky is raging, the ground is dark, the orb is watching. And at the very last second, they take their palette knife, load it with black paint, and just scrape it right over those yellow flowers.
Wiping them out.
Wiping them out entirely. They remove them completely. How does the thesis of the painting change?
Oh, the entire philosophical architecture of the painting collapses into nihilism.
Nihilism.
Yeah.
You think it becomes totally meaningless.
Completely. Without the flowers, the verdant wilds cease to be an ecosystem. They become a graveyard. They become a dead, inert mass just waiting to be consumed by the entropy above.
Wow.
The golden orb would still hold the center, but its vigil would be a tragedy. It would be a gyroscope spinning in a void, keeping watch over a dead world.
Because there's nothing left to watch over.
Right. The flowers, microscopic as they are the absolute proof that the vigil matters. They are the proof that the ground is not dead, merely shadowed.
It's amazing how the smallest amount of paint on the canvas carries the heaviest conceptual weight.
Precisely. Their absence would turn a narrative of endurance into a narrative of absolute crushing defeat. The macro-level forces of the universe might be massive, but the meaning is found in the micro-level response to those forces.
So we have dissected the anatomy of this painting. We've analyzed the physical chemistry of the impasto, the optical physics of the color contrast, the violent clash of the hot sky and cold earth, the gyroscopic anchor of the orb, and the pyrophytic resilience of the tiny flowers.
We've pulled it all apart.
We have. Now, we have to look at how all these discrete mechanisms operate together to construct the emotional arc of the viewer.
Because the painting functions as an engine. It's designed to pull the viewer through a highly specific sequence of cognitive states. We need to track the saccadic movements of the eye to understand this journey.
Saccadic movements.
The rapid jumps the eye makes as it scans a visual field.
Right, because the experience of the painting is completely dependent on proximity and time. When you first walk into the gallery space from 30 feet away, you are subjected to blunt force trauma.
It's overwhelming.
The macro elements hit you all at once. The massive scale, the screaming reds, the heavy impasto casting actual shadows, the immediate physiological response is disorientation and stress.
The artist intentionally induces visual fatigue, but the brilliance of the composition is that it doesn't abandon you in that state of stress.
It gives you a way out.
It provides an escape route. It guides you out of the chaos.
Let's trace that route. Where does the eye go first to escape the noise?
Well, amidst the swirling chaos of the sky, the human brain desperately hunts for recognizable geometry and high contrast, so the eye immediately snaps to the golden orb. It is the life raft.
You grab onto the gyroscope to stabilize yourself, but the painting doesn't let you stay there, does it?
No, it doesn't. From the orb, the aggressive directional impasto lines of the fiery sky catch your peripheral vision. They physically sweep your gaze outward, dragging you through the turbulence of the red atmosphere. You follow the convection currents down toward the horizon line,
where you violently crash into the heavy, immovable dark greens of the verdant wilds.
Just a hard stop.
And the downward trajectory of the brushstrokes in the ground section pulls your eye deep into the shadows. You have literally gone from the safety of the orb, through the fire, and straight into the dark woods.
And that visual descent mirrors a descent into the underworld, or, a plunge into the most difficult aspects of the unconscious mind.
The depression we talked about.
Right. And if the eye stops there, in the dark umber and black impasto, the experience is profoundly depressing. But as your eye adjusts to the darkness, scanning the heavy texture, it eventually snags on a tiny point of high-value color.
You find the yellow flowers.
And because the viewer had to endure the optical stress of the fiery sky and the heavy darkness of the woods just to locate them, the neurological reward of finding the flowers is massive.
It's a relief.
It triggers a huge release of dopamine. It isn't a cheap, easily accessible joy. It is an earned relief.
That sequence of saccadic movements, the literal journey of the eye, it perfectly tracks the emotional arc. Let me map this onto a different medium to show how universal this structure is.
Go for it.
Experiencing this painting is identical to listening to a masterful symphony.
A symphony. How does the auditory structure align with the visual?
So when a massive, turbulent symphony begins, you are often hit with a chaotic, overwhelming crescendo. The brass section is blaring, the timpani drums are shaking the floorboards, the violins are playing these frantic atonal scales.
It's an auditory assault.
Exactly, that auditory assault is a fiery sky. It floods your system.
It demands total attention through sheer volume and complexity.
Then the conductor drops the tempo and the volume. The high frequencies vanish, and you plunge into a slow, heavy, brooding section dominated by the cellos and the double basses.
The dark woods.
Yes. The music feels thick, dark, and difficult to move through. That is the auditory equivalent of the verdant wilds. You feel the crushing weight of the low frequencies.
The tension builds not through chaos, but through heavy anticipation.
Exactly. And just when you think the symphony is going to end on that oppressive, despairing chord, the heavy instruments pull back just enough, and a single, crystal-clear, impossibly high note is played on a solitary flute.
The yellow flowers.
The yellow flowers of the flute. The note is fragile, it's tiny compared to the roar of the full orchestra, but its clarity cuts through all the heavy bass that preceded it. It completely recontextualizes the darkness. It turns the heavy, low-frequency dread into a necessary backdrop that makes the pure high note sound even more beautiful.
That synthesis clarifies exactly why the piece is titled Celestial Vigil over the Verdant Wilds.
The title is a roadmap.
It is a roadmap for navigating extreme contrast. The celestial vigil represents the macro-level order, the cosmic, the mathematical, the gyroscopic stability of the universe.
And the ground.
The verdant wilds represents the messy, heavy, chaotic, shadowed reality of earthly existence. The painting acts as a bridge between the two. The vigil guarantees that the chaos has a boundary, and the flowers prove that the earth is capable of generating resilience within that boundary.
And this connects to something fundamentally important about why we even bother analyzing art in this much depth.
Why we do what we do.
Right. True art isn't just a historical artifact documenting what some person felt a century ago. Art is an advanced toolkit for processing human reality.
It provides the cognitive frameworks necessary to interpret our own experiences.
This painting isn't just an image of a weird sky and some dark trees. It is a schematic for enduring chaos.
That's a powerful way to put it.
When you understand the engineering of this canvas, the optical reality of the fire, the sheer mass of the darkness, the reliance on a central gyroscopic anchor, and the pursuit of microscopic resilience, you are literally learning the mechanics of psychological survival.
It doesn't tell you the storm is an illusion.
No. It tells you the storm is real, the darkness is heavy, but the anchor holds, and the flowers endure.
It is a manifesto against nihilism. It validates the terror of existence through its aggressive texture and stressful color theory, but it insists, through its geometry and hidden details, that destruction is not the final state of matter.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of conceptual territory today.
We really have.
We've gone from the molecular viscosity of oil paint casting microshadows through the optical physics of chromatic aberration, all the way to the evolutionary biology of pyrophytic ecosystems and the psychological architecture of endurance. I want to thank you, the listener, for dedicating your time and focus to this deep dive.
Analyzing art at this resolution requires significant cognitive stamina. We really appreciate your willingness to engage with the material.
I hope today has demonstrated that unpacking a single static image, learning how to read the emotional braille of impasto and the physics of color, it can yield just as much narrative power, philosophy, and insight as reading a dense novel.
The stories are encoded in the paint.
They are. We just have to learn the syntax of the visual language to extract them.
And the visual language operates on rules as rigid as grammar, provided we are willing to look closely enough to see them at work.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final challenge, a thought to carry with you that builds on the mechanics we've explored today. The next time you find yourself standing under a fiery, turbulent sky in your own life, when the external pressures feel like a convection current you just cannot control, and the heat of anxiety causes your thoughts to race in by, Ask yourself, where is your gyroscope?
Where is your anchor?
What is the solid, unchanging structure keeping vigil over your center of mass? And more importantly, when you feel the gravity of the situation pulling you down into the heavy, dense darkness of your own verdant wilds, if you force your eyes to adjust to the shadows, can you spot the small, defiant yellow flowers that the fire has forced into bloom?